Привет, my name is John Uke. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to be talking about basically our personalities and how those affect us in the world of games. There's a bunch of game designers, some of the best ones in the world, who got together and analyzed what is it about games that makes them fun. And they came up with at least 9 different types of categories, which I'll go over in this presentation. But something really interesting is that actually most games are only delivering on 2 or 3 kinds of fun. And so if you're an indie designer, it's really important to know what are the kinds of fun that you're trying to deliver towards so that you can have a game that's really focused and actually fun to play, so you're not adding extra features that your users don't care about. This is also useful information knowing about your customers' personalities and who are your customers, what are they like, what are their behaviors, and how do you market to them. My background with this is I've spent thousands of hours studying these frameworks, participated in forums a lot, on YouTube videos. I've done research breaking down different types of personalities and populations and ways that people think. And then also written research papers, dozens of pages long. And then GameTree itself is a company that I run that analyzes people's personalities and matches them with friends. And then next up will be helping them find games, especially indie games that they'll enjoy, because a big challenge for gamers is knowing what games they'll like, finding those games and being able to trust them. So the first framework is called the aesthetics of play. And this is the one that was developed by a lot of famous game designers. And as a game designer, you have control over little pieces like how fast does a person walk or how much do bullets spread. And this is eventually about what that builds up to, like a pyramid. And this is the way that your users and the players will view your game. It's from the top down, but you build the game from the ground up. Then we have MBTI, known here more often as Socionics, which is based on the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. And his work basically is about how we think and how we do things. Different people, our minds are like tools, and we use the best tools that we have to approach different situations. So for one person, if you're really good at projecting your emotions and connecting with other people, that's how you're going to kind of think. But if another person, for example myself, I tend to be very efficient and organized, and I try to solve things very objectively, removing myself from the equation. So that's how I'm going to view situations. And it pays to know what kind of users or gamers you have and how they value things, and also even for yourself, knowing this information also helps a lot in life with communication or being able to know if you like a game. Then the last one is called Enneagram, and this is about why we do things. So this is what is fun, how we do things, and why we do them. And usually this is actually based around people's deepest fears, and people express love and care for other people based on the things that they want or the things that they're afraid of. So it's people kind of give what they value. So the first one up is the aesthetics of play. And in GameTree, we actually have an aesthetics of play test for the users. And we have custom character art that kind of expresses these sorts of different styles of fun. And so for your own games, you can look at some of these and try to analyze what are the top ones that most specifically are for your game, and what are other kinds of games that model that, and how are the mechanics that you're developing contributing or detracting from this, so you're not just making a bunch of things that seem like a good idea, but you get lost in the small details and they actually don't turn out to be fun at the end of the day. I've talked about these a bit, and the first one up here is discovery. Discovery is, for example, Skyrim. Skyrim's a big open world games are popular here. They often have hidden content, big levels, Easter eggs. People love exploring, we're curious. So games that have discovery are going to have these mechanics, and you should really focus in on these. And though if your game is maybe a more Mario type game, you might not necessarily want to include too many Mario mechanics, because trying to please too many audiences at once pleases none. Next up is sense pleasure. So here you can see we have some sort of animalistic person. This is about having good audio, good video, really flashy things like first-person shooters, for example, engage in sense pleasure a lot. It's about basically pleasure of the senses. They often have interesting graphics, good music, they're engaging. So for example, if one of the things that you really like about your game is the soundtrack, for example, FTL, Faster Than Light, they were known for their soundtrack, and they also went back and had really vintage graphics before as many people were doing that sort of throwback thing with indie games. And so sense pleasure is something that appealed to those gamers, but it was an interesting mix because it also came along with a very challenging roguelike gameplay. But you could tell the sort of aesthetics of games based on these. Another example of sense pleasure would be, for example, Call of Duty, because they're very fast-paced, people are engaged in their senses, and people think that that's fun out of the game. Here we have roleplay, and roleplay is about make-believe, it's pretending. As children, we do this a lot. As children, we like all of these things, and that's a lot of why we like games. But this is about pretending. It's often social. For example, World of Warcraft. Something that makes that game so successful is it's able to deliver successfully on very many different aesthetics. And somebody who plays on a roleplay server is somebody who likes socializing, they like pretending that they're somebody else. And that's fun, it gets us to think differently. And they like playing different roles. A lot of RPGs do this. Fellowship is another one, and it's about being social with other people, cooperating, basically just building camaraderie and friends. People join guilds. So if your game has fellowship as an aesthetic, a lot of these people value, for example, getting to know people outside of the game, or having better communication mechanics if this is something that they're playing with, or more opportunities for them to have to work together. Then we have story. You all know this, it's stories, human drama. But if that's a strong point in your game, then really focus on that. Or if it's just a part of the game because it has to be there, like most games, then don't necessarily worry about it too much, because that's not why people are playing the game. Challenge. It's about Dark Souls, basically. Just beating your head against the wall, having to train, practice, push yourself to be able to succeed. It's kind of like an obstacle course, and something important for challenge, if you have a challenging game, is that as the game goes on, it gets progressively more complicated and the challenges get harder, so people feel like they're growing and they're pushing themselves. And some players, they don't like challenge. They play games to relax, for example, like a lot of social casual games. So in your game, think about what is it that you are trying to make, and then really make sure all the mechanics are lining up to these bigger pictures. Next one is expression, and games with very advanced character editors have a lot of expression. If you have one or two things in your game that yield well to expression, where people can maybe decorate a house, then maybe it pays to invest more in features where they get more opportunities to express themselves, so that those kinds of people who like those games are gonna really find it, because it's your evangelists, your 10% of users who like the game the most, they're gonna go out of their way to write a review or tell their friends or follow up for other games. Casual is about progress over time. It's more idle. It's, for example, games like Clash of Clans or Mafia. And this is about like farming, fishing, building, gathering, elements like those. And these are a very big category, because most gamers aren't extremely hardcore gamers, and these ones are more approachable. It's easier to make into party games, etc. Competition is the last one. And competition is about dominance. It's about competing head to head. They want to feel superior. If your game is very competitive, it's nice to show like awards or leaderboards or some sort of way to memorialize people, because that's something that these gamers value a lot. And actually with fellowship, it's recently been discovered that there's a very strong correlation with fellowship, where it's a positive correlation. So people who want to meet other people, to play with them, to really connect with others, they actually can want to do that and be competitive at the same time. So those are actually not opposite, but they're similar. So think about that as well. Role-playing games are a big genre. People play role-playing games because some of them like the progression mechanics, the kind of the casual improvement over time grinding. Other people play them because they have very advanced character editors. Other people, role-playing games have good stories. Some are challenging. Some are even competitive, like PvP, World of Warcraft. Other ones, they play for the expression, the role-playing. So role-playing games are a massive category, and just because somebody likes role-playing games doesn't mean that they're going to like every role-playing game. For example, just tying this back to myself to bring it to life, I like role-playing games, I consider that, but as I've gotten to know psychology and this sort of gaming better, I learned that a game like The Witcher, which one of its strongest elements is story, it got really good reviews and I ended up buying it, but I ended up hating the game because I actually don't like story that much. I like movies and I like people telling stories, but in games, as an aesthetic, it's not something that I personally value that much. So I like more like challenge, competition, things like that. And so think about that with your games, is what are the main elements of your game, and really try to advertise that and set people's expectations so they won't dislike what you make, and so they'll actually know what they're getting into. Next up is about the MBTI and Socionics. This is the study of how people think. People tend to, for the most part, stay the same type throughout their life, and this is a lot of archetypes about what do people enjoy doing, what sort of role do they have. People, we're kind of like ants in a way, where we're very cooperative, we're very social, we communicate a lot, and we survive because we all have different skills and things that we enjoy doing. And a lot of this correlates throughout different areas of life, and gaming is no exception. It's right now very popularly used in the workplace, where a lot of companies, especially in the United States, do these tests to analyze people if they're good fits for the jobs, if they're going to enjoy the things that they're doing. And it's also used a lot in dating as well, because there's different types of relationships. It's like almost like mechanics or algorithms, patterns between our personality archetypes and ways of thinking, and what kinds of relationships people have with each other. So these are, in short, it's actually a much deeper framework than this, but this is a simplified version. But there's extraversion and introversion. Extraversion is not just a blanket extrovert. There's a lot of different kinds of extroverts in this framework. I'm an extrovert because I want to change the outside world a lot, and that requires the efficiency, objectivity that I told you about, and that's one of the defining characteristics of an ENTJ, E being extrovert. Whereas somebody else might be an extrovert, and maybe they're an extroverted sensor. An extroverted sensor is somebody who really lives in their environment, and they're not necessarily wanting to act on the world, but they're perceiving the world a lot, where they notice things with their eyes and their senses, and they're very in tune with the real world. So in this framework, just being an extrovert doesn't mean that you're social. One person might like being productively social, another might just like connecting with other people's emotions. Same for introverts, where one person might just be really in tune with their emotions, their values, how they're filtering everything, and somebody else might be more conservative and be comparing things to their past experiences a lot more, and just using that as a filter. Sensing, intuition. Sensing is more concrete data. Intuition's more about the connections between data. Intuitive players tend to be more comfortable with ideas. Sensors, more with facts. Sensors are much, much more common in first-person shooters, for example, because those deal a lot with just hard facts, instincts, reflexes. Extroverts tend to play a lot more board games, for example. Thinking and feeling. Thinking is basically cold logic. It's removing yourself and people from any sort of situations. And for some people, that's a lot easier for them to think, like a lot of programmers. Whereas feeling, they are a lot more comfortable when they can connect or have some sort of personal attachment to everything. So think about that in a game as well. For example, stories often get in touch with feelings where you sympathize with a character or you identify with the character. Last one here is judging and perceiving. And judging people, they tend to be more organized, on time, and judgmental. Perceivers are a little bit more chaotic, relaxed, easygoing. And by knowing which kind of box you fall into, you can actually discover a huge amount about yourself, not just in the scope of these, but you'll discover all these little intricacies from just 4 letters that really go deeper than the sorts of questions you might answer if you're taking a test. And then also knowing the categories of your gamers, how to appeal to them, where these kinds of people go. For example, there's information available online, or if you check out GameTree, we publish it in blog posts, but about what sorts of platforms people play on, or what game preferences and genres different sorts of types have. All right, and now I'm going to dive into the Myers-Briggs Jungian archetypes. We broke them up into the most common 4 categories that people usually do. It's just that the biggest differences stand out when you slice the 16 types into these 4 categories. And these are characters that we have when people take a test on our app. They'll see a little character to represent them. So rationals, these are the kinds of people that if you want to convince a rational, if your target audience is rationals, you just give them the data and they'll make their own decision. They want to think about things logically, and they tend to really like strategy games, open world games. They play mages a lot because they love playing with environments, ideas, things like that. So if you know that rationals are a lot of your audience, then don't try to do strong emotional appeals, for example, in your marketing, because these people aren't going to buy it. And these are just the 4 different types. This is my type, it's strategic director. INTJ is kind of a more mastermind behind the scenes type person. So just knowing the sort of quadrant often helps more than knowing individual types, because quadrants behave similarly. So guardians, These people are defined by being very traditional. They're less likely to play games because they're very safety and security seeking by their nature. They are very practical. Their strongest form of logic that they used is whatever worked in the past will work in the future, or if something's popular and well accepted, then it must be good. And this is the main type of thinking that keeps humanity alive because it prevents making mistakes, and it's true, if something worked in the past, it'll work in the future most likely. But out of gaming, these people tend to like card games. They have very balanced tastes. They tend to take on defensive roles in games, and they also like having more clear-cut objectives. They don't like open-world games as much. The idealists, intuitive feelers, these people, they are kind of a mix of like emotional rationals. They really like stories. In life, if you want to sell one of these guys, the SJs, the Guardians, you tell them, oh, this is the best bet, this is the most secure thing, it's a really good choice, but these aren't going to be your audience if you're doing indie games, because these people, they don't discover new stuff very often. They're usually the late adopters. Idealists are great first adopters alongside rationals, because idealists, the way to sell them is to sell like a big picture. If you even tell them, I'm an indie developer and I'm trying to make a living doing this, like that's gonna strike a chord with them and they're gonna be more likely to comply. Or if you tell them you're starting a movement or some sort of big emotional appeal, these guys will be all over it. They also like open world games. They're really big role-playing game players. They're very trustworthy people. They don't tend to lie a lot or expect other people are lying. Though they don't tend to be as hardcore on like consoles and systems. And then the last quadrant we have here is the artisans. And artisans, they're the kinds of people who are very in the moment. They like to do things with their hands a lot. They're more likely to like sports and racing games. They are more likely to be fascinated by sense pleasure as an aesthetic, or to play virtual reality games. They like tactile things like board games, miniatures. These people, they tend to not quite finish games that they start because their attention changes quickly. They live more in the moment. A lot of first-person shooter games as well are in this category. They also like multiplayer a lot. They're very competitive, very like outgoing. So knowing just what kind of quadrant you have, you can sort of research either the quadrant or the individual types, and maybe there's only like a couple of these types that apply to your games, or maybe a couple from different types of quadrants, but knowing that helps you not only market, but also design the game for those players. Lastly, the last framework I'll be speaking about here is the Enneagram, and that's about what motivates us. I'll leave it up to you to do a little bit more of your own research to not take too much of your time, but for the most part, it's about what are the things that we're afraid of. And for most of us, this is things that we have as children that are some sort of insecurities. Some people outgrow them, or these change over time. They're not as fixed in a person's psychology. But for example, like I myself am an achiever, and achievers, they want to like go out and do things in the world. They want to get high scores. They want to like show off a lot. And that's sort of motivated by a fear of being worthless if they don't do things. So by knowing sort of the different types of archetypes of people, you can sort of fulfill people's needs. People in general among friendships get along with people who have similar types. And this isn't one where you're one type or another. Everybody has all of these things, but it's just a matter of which ones are the strongest in somebody. And if you're looking for friends or gaming buddies, usually it helps if you have somebody who has similar needs that you have, because you'll validate each other in those ways, or you get along better as a friend. But conversely, in like relationships, for example, people tend to have opposite types. So if like you were building a dating app, then you'd want to match people with opposite types. But if you have, like you're trying to match friends for a multiplayer game, for example, then it helps to pick people who have similar types. So if you know what types of fun somebody likes, what motivates them in life, and how they think, it gives you a good picture of the types of gamers you have, and they'll get along with each other well. You can market to them, you can really please those core users. Because there's so many games out there, and better than just making a game and hope people find it is really build a game for certain kinds of people and make it the best game for them. This is also, again, about how we express love. People, they give love because they want to make other people feel comfortable, feel happy, and that you do that by doing what you think would make you feel happy. An example here, again, is an enthusiast. These people are afraid of being trapped in suffering. Maybe they had like a loss in their family, and they were really sad for a few years when they were young. Or maybe they're afraid of like a medical condition. So these people, to kind of combat that, they're motivated by not being in one place, not getting too attached to things. They like variety a lot. So a way to appeal to an enthusiast, for example, is having a lot of excitement, a lot of flexibility, variety, not making people commit to certain ideas, whether they be like leveling up or certain decisions in games. An investigator, they're sort of afraid of being lied to, so they like to, because that's their fear, they like to have lots of information. So if your game wants to appeal to investigators, you can have deep lore, make sure you really check your facts with everything, provide a little bit more credibility. And then the way that they would express love, for example, is they would basically share information. They love sharing information, giving accurate, valuable information. That's what they value in life. So here's just a couple screenshots of GameTree, an app that I'm working on that combines a lot of this. It's out in beta, and next week we'll be releasing an official launch. So you can see, for example, there's different aesthetics of play used here and a personality type. People can list games that they want to play for any platform, and if the games don't exist in the database, they can just add it immediately. And then we connect them with people who have similar tastes in games, platforms, genres, personalities. And the next feature we're working on after we finish this part, iron it out, is to help people find indie games. Because indie games are awesome, and I think it's really cool that people are designing their own games, and it's something I would love to do. But the hard part is that the top few companies, the top like maybe 1% of companies, get 99% of the sales and the money in the industry. So a feature like this, where people can actually discover indie games, and not only just discover them, but know that it's the right game for them based on their tastes and on their personality, is going to give people a lot more reason to try something out. And they'll be reading reviews not just from random people, but people who have similar tastes and personalities to them. So it's going to make up for a lot of the difficulty of not having valid reviews or trust in a game. So I recommend looking this up. Probably in about 2 or 3 months we'll be having this feature fully fleshed out, and so you'll be able to go on and add your own games, and then people will be able to discover those games. I'm happy to answer questions here if you guys have any. Yeah.
Is there a soft for mass research about psychology players? Is there a good soft for this?
Is there a good
software for mass research?
I'm not positive on software, but there are a few platforms. One of them is quanticfoundry.com. Quantic Foundry. They're probably doing the most similar research. They're less of a business and more of a research institute, and they provide intelligence to gaming companies, marketers, publishers. But they just introduce a lot of interesting studies around this. There's also, if you Google Socionics or Myers-Briggs, there's a website called 16 Personalities that's become very popular recently. And a lot of this is starting to become into the mainstream because they're starting to associate it with cool characters, better branding, whereas before it was always more of a niche subject. But so far as analytics go, GameTree, eventually you want to get into that, just because I think that people they don't want their time wasted, they don't want to see spam, they want to see things that are relevant to them. And so we'd make it optional for our users to get notified about things that kind of fit their tastes, to learn things. But as of now, I don't know of any analytic platforms. But you can do a lot of your own research and kind of translate that to the platforms and tools available.
Also, second question is, there is a thing called Bartle taxonomy of players, if you know. Player killer, player achiever, player...
Yeah.
How is relevant today?
So that's a really popular one. It's a very simplistic version. But essentially, Bartle's taxonomy of players is that there's 4 types of players. And there's a lot of cool theories about how in a massive multiplayer game you want to balance these types of players, where if there's too many killers, for example, then people who are trying to explore are not going to be able to explore because they're getting killed too much. That's more about balancing game ecosystems or learning as a person, like what kind of motivates, but there's only, again, 4 frameworks. People are very complicated, and we have a lot of variety in what we do. All of these, though, these aren't very scientific. They're more just kind of like philosophy, but they're useful. They can be applied in different ways, and it's all about taking this kind of idea and just trying to draw different boxes around it or cut it in different ways. So I think Bartle's taxonomy is a helpful way to box things up. I just chose not to speak about it because I think that it doesn't have as much value. It's easier to understand, but it's not as useful. Again, I think it could be useful though for balancing a massive multiplayer game, for example, making sure that the proportions of players are making a good ecosystem. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Cool.
I have a question. What kind of data are you analyzing to make decisions in your application? So, for example, users are just selecting the favorite games, and you analyze which games they like and makes a preference, or you analyzing some strategies they use inside of the games?
So right now it's the first one that you said. Basically, we analyze the gamers' inputs into our application. Later on, we'll be syncing more with all the gaming platforms like Steam, Xbox Live, all of that, and analyzing any information we can get. There's a lot of information about different personalities, motivations, how they line up with different classes, for example, in games, things like that. So eventually making groups will be like a strong feature.
Why I'm asking, because for example, like Warcraft, somebody like to play, build the base and like build the world, and other people like just to attack somebody and kill somebody. So even in one game, there are completely different strategies.
Yeah,
different
totally, and that's a lot of the aesthetics of play. For example, in the example of World of Warcraft, somebody who likes to build things, that's a lot of expression. People, when you're building things, it's being creative. It's like when you're building something, you're also building yourself or expressing yourself in a way. A game like Minecraft is a very big expression game. World of Warcraft is successful because it does identify many things, but it's difficult because people don't, when games are advertised, they're given a genre, and the genres aren't very helpful, like role-playing game. Role-playing games hit almost every single different type of aesthetic, and the way people pick games that they like is based on these reasons, not based on the genres. So by being able to really target what is fun about your game and communicate that, then people who are sort of on the fence about whether they want to buy something, or maybe somebody from a separate genre might get pulled into the game. Then the people who like fighting a lot, they might be competition. And somebody might like both of these, but most games on average have 2 or 3 of these that they do very well. Some of the best games do 5 or 6 very well, like World of Warcraft and Minecraft, but that's very rare, and it's better if you don't think that you can deliver those extremely well, it's better to focus on the ones that you can do well, because again, it's better to have a very small committed audience who loves it, rather than just be a mediocre game to a lot of people. Was that? Okay. Yes?
Hey, John. It's a great lecture. I didn't expect to hear something like this in the conference.
Thank you.
And I want to talk about Pokemon Go, where they have 3 factions that was pretty straightforward about the personalities of and types of people who will join these factions. And they ended up with almost more than 40% in the blue team. Well, strategic players, smart players. About 20% in the yellow team, well, energetic players, and in the red team, compassion and love, they end up with 30% of players. So almost half of players will appear to be in the blue team, and this, on some point, in some cities, broke the game. Well, the blue team controlled almost all of the city. All other teams cannot, well, capture the sport gyms. How we can fix this? How we can balance? Well, you also can have a question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it seems like when they designed that, they should have analyzed better the populations ahead of time, if that's going to be a mechanic, or a way that they could adjust for that. I mean, that's game design decisions, I won't go into that, I'll focus on personality. The blue players, they tend, that's like the rationals, they're even blue in this slide that I showed you before.
Well, yes, it's associated pretty well. Blue,
red, and these are popular colors to allocate to different groups. So blue players, they're early adopters, one. So blue people, they're alongside the green, they're going to be usually the first customers that discover something. because they're seeking out new information. Like these kinds of people, when they're learning, it energizes them rather than makes them tired. So they're gonna try out a new game first. So that's one bias when a new game comes out, is you can expect more of these players at the beginning, but as the lifespan of the game goes on, you'll probably find less blue players because one, they'll get bored after they learn the mechanics and want something new, and also the yellows and the reds, the later adopters, are gonna also find the application more. So over time, it'll self-balance. Also, the yellows and the reds, they don't play games like digital games quite as much as the blues and the greens. I take that back. The yellows they'll play, but they play, I guess, a bit differently. For example, Counter-Strike is probably 80% of the yellow players.
What about Overwatch?
Overwatch, so that's a game that has a number of aesthetics. They have good expression because you have a lot of different kinds of skins and sprays that you can use. But again, it appeals a lot to these guys because it's like a first-person shooter, but it has more complexity and tactics, and those are things that these people like. But at the same time, it really is a great shooter. It's really smooth, it has really cool characters, so that's going to appeal a lot to sense pleasure, like the yellow players, they value that a lot.
It's also appealing to the types of personalities, well, different types of gameplay for different types of characters.
Totally. So if you're making a game, for example, for these guys, it's kind of hard to do unless you're a AAA studio. But if you're appealing to these guys, when you're designing your game, you might not want to have, you might want to lead, hold people's hands through the rules a little bit more, because they're not going to necessarily make these giant intuitive jumps. They want things to be straightforward, and they also want things to be familiar. So if you're making a game targeting these people, then you probably want to reuse the same controls or similar mechanics from games that they already play. These guys also tend to be more Counter-Strike players. I guess you can see here, an ISTJ, they like order, consistency, they tend to be found in accounting a lot. They like games like Monopoly. Whereas this is an ISFJ, and they like Farmville, Bejeweled, games like that. So those, like Farmville and Bejeweled, those are really popular games. They're more casual, easier to get into. So these types of people will like that. I'm getting too much into the details, but there's a lot of variety among the types, but these are ways of simplifying it as well. Did I answer your question?
Bravo.
Nice. Any other questions? Cool, thank you guys.